When Elon Musk brought his 12-year-old son to Harvard's meanest professor, everyone expected the boy to fail. Professor Marcus Henley was famous for making smart kids cry with impossible tests. But instead of answering the professor's hard questions, the quiet boy asked one simple question that changed everything. The tough teacher started crying. The mean professor became kind. One conversation healed 30 years of pain. What did this 12-year-old say that left the smartest man at Harvard speechless? And how did one boy's answer end up changing the whole world? Professor Marcus Henley sat behind his enormous wooden desk, reading the morning newspaper with a frown. The headline made him shake his head in disgust. 10-year-old genius solves college math problem. Nonsense, he muttered, folding the paper with a sharp snap. Intelligence comes with age and experience. These so-called child prodigies are just good at memorizing tricks. Marcus had spent 30 years at Harvard University, and he was proud of his reputation. Students called him the Wall because nobody could get past his tough questions. Other professors sent their most difficult students to him when they wanted to humble them. Parents of gifted children begged for meetings, hoping their little darlings could impress the famous Dr. Henley. They all left disappointed. His office walls were covered with certificates and awards. Toughest Professor of the Year hung right behind his chair. Photos showed him with important people, scientists, politicians, Nobel Prize winners. But there were no pictures of students smiling. No thank you cards from grateful families. Just serious faces and serious achievements. Marcus picked up a small, faded photograph from behind a stack of books. It showed a young boy with bright eyes holding a blue ribbon at a science fair. The boy was grinning from ear to ear, pure joy radiating from every part of his face. Marcus stared at the photo for a moment, then quickly shoved it back behind. The book's where it belonged. That a soft knock interrupted his thoughts. His secretary, Mrs. Williams, peeked her head through the door. She was the only person at Harvard who wasn't afraid of him, probably because she was old enough to be his mother. "Professor Henley," she said gently, "your 3 o'clock appointment is here." Marcus straightened his tie and put on his most serious expression. "Send them in." Today was special. Elon Musk himself had called, asking for a meeting about his son. Marcus almost said no. He didn't care about celebrities or their spoiled children. But curiosity got the better of him. What kind of kid would the world's most famous inventor raise? The door opened, and Elon Musk walked in. He was taller than Marcus expected, wearing a simple black t-shirt and jeans. But it was the boy beside him that caught Marcus's attention. The child looked about 12 years old, with messy brown hair and curious dark eyes. He wasn't what Marcus expected at all. No fancy clothes, no expensive gadgets, no attitude. Just a regular kid in a plain blue t-shirt and worn sneakers. The boy looked around the office with wonder, studying the books and certificates like they were treasures in a museum. "Professor Henley," Elon said, reaching out to shake hands. "Thank you for making time for us. This is my son, X." X stepped forward and offered his hand politely. "Nice to meet you, Professor. Your office is amazing. You must have read thousands of books." Marcus shook the boy's hand, surprised by the firm grip and direct eye contact. Most children looked at the floor when they met him. "Yes, well, knowledge requires dedication," he said stiffly. "Please, sit down." Marcus gestured to the chairs across from his desk. He noticed that X didn't fidget or look bored like other kids. Instead, the boy sat quietly, hands folded, paying attention to every word. "I'll get straight to the point," Elon began. "X has been homeschooled his entire life. He's different from other children, not just academically, but in how he sees the world. I've heard you're the best at evaluating young minds." Marcus felt his confidence grow. This was familiar territory. "I've tested hundreds of so-called gifted children, Mr. Musk. They usually fall apart under real pressure. Intelligence isn't about being clever. It's about depth, experience, and the ability to handle complex problems without crumbling." "I understand," Elon nodded. "X has some unique ways of thinking. I thought maybe you could help us understand his capabilities better." Marcus studied the boy. X was listening to every word, but didn't seem nervous or excited. Most kids either bragged about how smart they were or got scared and started crying. This one just sat there, calm and attentive. "Well then," Marcus said, pulling out a thick folder from his desk drawer. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The folder was labeled "Special Cases" in red ink. Inside were questions that had stumped graduate students, problems that made grown adults throw up their hands in frustration. Marcus had collected them over decades of teaching. They were his secret weapons against arrogant young minds. These aren't typical children's puzzles, Marcus warned, opening the folder. I don't believe in going easy on anyone, regardless of age. If you're truly gifted, you should be able to handle real challenges. X nodded seriously. I understand, Professor. I'm ready. We'll see about that, Marcus muttered under his breath. He had seen this confidence before. Bright children who thought they were special, who had been told they were geniuses by their parents and teachers. They all started out bold and ended up in tears, but something about this boy felt different. There was no arrogance in his eyes, no desperate need to prove himself. X looked genuinely curious, like he was excited to learn something new rather than worried about looking smart. Marcus pushed the feeling aside. Every child was the same when you got down to it. They all cracked under real pressure. Very well, Marcus said, pulling out the first question. He had used this one to humble a dozen child prodigies. It was perfect, complex enough to sound impressive, but impossible to answer without years of advanced study. That he looked directly at X, ready to watch another cocky kid realize he wasn't as special as he thought. Here's your first challenge, Marcus began, his voice taking on the cold, formal tone that had intimidated students for 30 years. If you could solve any problem in the world, what would it be and how would you approach it? Most children gave simple answers: end hunger, stop wars, cure diseases. Standard responses that showed they didn't understand how complicated the world really was. Marcus expected X to say something about space travel or electric cars, trying to impress his father. Instead, something unexpected happened. X's eyes lit up, not with nervousness or the desperate need to please, but with genuine excitement. It was the look of someone who had just been asked their favorite question. The boy sat back in his chair, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. For the first time since the meeting began, Marcus felt a tiny flutter of uncertainty in his chest. What was this kid thinking? And why did he suddenly look so happy? Marcus gripped his pen tighter, waiting for an answer that would prove, once again, that children were just children, no matter who their parents were. But X just sat there, thinking, with that strange, knowing look in his eyes. The silence stretched on, and Marcus began to feel something he hadn't experienced in years when dealing with a child. He felt nervous. Marcus had never felt nervous around a child before. For 30 years, he had been the one making students sweat. Now this 12-year-old boy was sitting quietly, thinking about his question, and somehow Marcus was the one feeling uncomfortable. The silence stretched for a full minute. Most kids blurted out answers right away, desperate to sound smart. But X just sat there, his eyes focused somewhere beyond the office walls, like he was seeing something Marcus couldn't. Well, Marcus said impatiently, do you need me to repeat the question? No, sir, X said softly. I heard you. I'm just thinking. More silence. Marcus tapped his pen against his desk. The sound echoed in the quiet room like a tiny drumbeat. Even Elon seemed to be holding his breath. Finally, X looked directly at Marcus. His dark eyes were serious but kind. Professor, the boy said, before I answer your question, can I ask you something? Marcus blinked in surprise. That's not how this works, young man. I ask the questions, you give the answers. I know, X said gently, but my question is connected to your question. It will help me give you a better answer. Something in the boy's voice made Marcus pause. There was no challenge in it, no smartness or attitude, just genuine curiosity. Fine, Marcus said, crossing his arms. What's your question? X tilted his head slightly, studying Marcus's face. When was the last time you felt truly happy? The question hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. His pen stopped tapping. His mouth fell open slightly. Of all the things he expected this child to ask, this wasn't one of them. That's not relevant, Marcus stammered. We're not here to discuss my feelings, young man. We're here to test your abilities. But it is connected, X said, his voice still gentle. You see, Professor, I think the biggest problem in the world isn't hunger or war or climate change. Those are symptoms. The real problem is that people have forgotten how to connect with each other. Marcus felt his carefully built walls starting to shake. That's a nice sentiment, but let's focus on concrete problems with measurable solutions. Save the philosophy for your English class. X nodded respectfully. Okay, what if I told you I've been working on something that could help millions of people communicate better? Not through technology, but through understanding emotions. Elon shifted in his chair. Marcus noticed the man. Looked proud but also concerned, like he'd seen his son surprise adults this way before. Emotions? Marcus scoffed, trying to regain control of the conversation. This is Harvard, not a therapy session. Intelligence is about facts, logic, reasoning, not feelings. But feelings drive everything. X said simply. Why do people start wars? Because they feel threatened. Why do they ignore hungry children? Because they feel overwhelmed. Why do smart people sometimes act mean? Because they feel misunderstood. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. The boy had a point, but admitting that would mean losing ground. Let's move on to something more concrete, Marcus said, flipping through his folder. He pulled out a complex mathematics problem that usually took college students hours to solve. Numbers, equations, formulas, safe territory where feelings didn't matter. Solve this, he said, sliding the paper across his desk. X looked at the problem for exactly 30 seconds. Then he picked up a pencil and wrote down the answer. Just like that. No scratch work, no hesitation. Marcus grabbed the paper and checked the solution. It was correct. Perfectly, completely correct. Lucky guess, Marcus muttered, but his confidence was starting to crack. Would you like me to show you how I solved it? X offered. No, Marcus said quickly. He didn't want to admit that the boy's method might be different from his own, possibly even better. That he pulled out another problem. This one involved advanced physics concepts that most high school students had never heard of. X solved it in under a minute, then another, and another. Each problem fell before this quiet boy like dominoes. Marcus's hands began to shake slightly. This wasn't supposed to happen. Children weren't supposed to be this smart. They weren't supposed to see through his tough exterior. They weren't supposed to ask him when he last felt happy. How are you doing this? Marcus demanded. Math is like a language, X explained. Once you understand the patterns, the problems tell you how to solve them. But professor, can I ask you something else? Another question. Marcus felt sweat forming on his forehead. You looked sad when I asked about happiness, X observed. And you looked angry when I mentioned that smart people sometimes act mean. Are you okay? No student had ever asked Marcus if he was okay. In 30 years of teaching, not one had shown concern for his feelings. Students feared him, respected him, sometimes hated him, but none had ever cared about his well-being. I'm fine, Marcus said curtly, but his voice cracked slightly on the word fine. Elon leaned forward. Marcus, if you need to take a break. No, Marcus insisted, pulling himself together. I have one more test. The most important one. His hands were shaking now as he reached for a special folder he kept locked in his desk drawer. The label read Impossible Questions in faded red ink. These weren't math problems or science puzzles. They were philosophical questions with no right answers, designed to frustrate and humble even the most brilliant minds. Questions that revealed character instead of knowledge. Questions that showed how people really thought when they couldn't rely on memorized facts or practice solutions. Questions that had broken the spirit of every gifted child who had ever sat where X was sitting now. This is where we separate the truly exceptional from the merely clever, Marcus said, trying to sound confident again. But as he opened the folder, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. X wasn't looking at the papers. He was looking at Marcus with those same kind, serious eyes. The boy could see right through him. Through 30 years of armor and attitude and academic achievement. Through all the walls Marcus had built to keep the world at a safe distance. And for some reason, instead of feeling angry or defensive, Marcus felt something else entirely. That he felt seen. The realization terrified him more than any question he had ever asked or answered, because being seen meant being vulnerable. And being vulnerable meant admitting that maybe, just maybe, this 12-year-old boy understood something about life that Marcus had forgotten long ago. Professor, X's voice was gentle. What's your impossible question? Marcus stared at the folder in his hands, but suddenly the words on the page seemed blurry. His mind was spinning backward through time, like pages of a book flipping in reverse. He was 8 years old again, sitting in Mrs. Patterson's third-grade classroom. His hand shot up eagerly when she asked who knew the answer to a hard math problem. The other kids were still counting on their fingers, but Marcus had figured it out in his head. Marcus knows. Marcus knows, he had said, bouncing in his seat with excitement. But Mrs. Patterson's face had turned cold. Marcus, put your hand down. You're showing off again. The memory hit him like a physical blow. He could still feel the shame that had washed over his 8-year-old self. The way the other children had laughed. The way his joy had turned to embarrassment in an instant. Smart children should be seen and not heard, Mrs. Patterson had said later, keeping him after class. Nobody likes a show-off. Marcus, you need to learn some humility. Young Marcus had walked home that day feeling like his intelligence was something dirty, something to be ashamed of. He had loved learning, loved discovering new things, loved the excitement of solving puzzles. But Mrs. Patterson made it sound like a character flaw. Professor X's voice brought Marcus back to the present. You look like you're remembering something sad. Marcus blinked, realizing he had been silent for several minutes. His hands were gripping the folders so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. I'm fine, he said automatically, but the words felt hollow. That day in Mrs. Patterson's classroom had changed everything. Marcus learned to hide his intelligence, to make himself smaller so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. He would deliberately give wrong answers sometimes, just to fit in. He pretended not to understand things that were easy for him, but hiding had made him angry. Why should he have to shrink himself to make others feel better? Why should his gifts be treated like a curse? So in high school, he had swung the other direction. He stopped hiding and started showing off aggressively. He corrected other students in class. He made sure everyone knew he was the smartest person in the room. He used his intelligence like a weapon. The pattern had continued through college. In graduate school, Marcus built a reputation as brilliant but cold. Other students respected his mind but avoided him personally. Professors praised his work but never invited him to dinner. He told himself he didn't care. Intelligence was what mattered, not popularity. Facts were more important than feelings. Being right was better than being liked. That by the time he became a professor himself, the walls around his heart were so thick that nothing could get through. He created tests designed to humble students the way Mrs. Patterson had humbled him. He made sure no 8-year-old would ever feel the joy of discovery without also learning that intelligence came with a price. Smart children need to be challenged. He would tell other professors. They need to learn that real intelligence requires discipline and suffering. But really, he was just passing on the lesson Mrs. Patterson had taught him, that being smart meant being alone. Now, watching X solve impossible problems with joy instead of stress, Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. This boy wasn't afraid of his intelligence. He wasn't using it as a weapon or hiding it like a shameful secret. He was simply happy. Professor, X said softly, you've been staring at that folder for 5 minutes. What's in there that's so scary? Marcus looked up, startled. It's not scary. These are the hardest questions I've ever created. They've stumped PhD students. But they scare you, X observed. I can see it in your eyes. How could a 12-year-old see things that grown adults missed? How could this child look past 30 years of armor and attitude to see the frightened boy underneath? They don't scare me, Marcus insisted, but his voice was shaking now. It's okay to be scared, X said gently. Everyone gets scared sometimes. Even professors. Marcus felt tears threatening behind his eyes. When was the last time someone had told him it was okay to feel something? When was the last time anyone had shown him kindness instead of fear or respect? He thought about the hidden photograph on his desk. That 8-year-old boy with the blue ribbon, grinning with pure happiness. What had happened to that joy? Where had that excited little boy gone? You were happy once, X said, as if reading his thoughts. I can tell. There's something in your face when you're not trying to be scary. Marcus's hands began to tremble. This child was seeing right through him, past all the defenses he had spent decades building. I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus whispered, but the words felt like lies even as he said them. Elon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. X, maybe we should give Professor Henley some space. No, Marcus said suddenly, surprising himself. Let him continue. He didn't know why he said it. For 30 years, he had been in complete control of every conversation in this office. But something about this boy made him want to stop fighting, stop hiding, stop pretending. Maybe it was the kindness in X's eyes. Maybe it was the way the child had asked about his happiness like it actually mattered. Maybe it was just exhaustion from carrying so much pain for so long. What happened to you? X asked, his voice full of genuine concern. What made you stop believing that being smart was something wonderful? The question hit Marcus like an arrow to the heart. Because that was exactly what had happened, wasn't it? Somewhere along the way, he had stopped believing that intelligence was a gift and started treating it like a burden. That he looked at this remarkable boy who solved impossible problems with ease, but cared more about emotions than equations. A child who could see past his harsh exterior to the wounded person underneath. And for the first time in 30 years, Marcus wanted to tell the truth, but the words stuck in his throat like stones. How could he explain to a 12-year-old boy that he had built his entire career on the pain of one cruel teacher? How could he admit that every harsh test, every impossible question, every student he had made cry was really just him trying to prove that Mrs. Patterson was wrong? Marcus started, then stopped. His hands were shaking so badly he had to put the folder down. "Take your time," X said softly. "The truth is usually heavy. It takes a while to lift it up." Marcus stared at this extraordinary child. Most kids would have been proud of solving those math problems. They would have bragged or shown off. But X seemed more interested in Marcus's feelings than his own achievements. "She told me I was showing off," Marcus whispered finally. "My third grade teacher, Mrs. Patterson. She said smart children should be seen and not heard." The words came out like a confession, quiet and painful. "That must have hurt," X said. "How old were you?" 8, Marcus replied. "The same age as..." He stopped, looking at that hidden photograph behind his books. "The same age as the boy in the picture," X finished gently. "The one with the science fair ribbon." Marcus's head snapped up. "How did you? I saw you look at it earlier," X explained. "You looked sad when you saw it, then hid it away. That's you, isn't it? Before someone taught you that being smart was something to be ashamed of." Tears began to fill Marcus's eyes. Everyone believed her. My parents, my classmates, other teachers. They all thought I was arrogant and needed to be humbled. "So you learned to hide," X said, understanding flooding his young face. "At first, yes. I would give wrong answers on purpose. I pretended not to understand things that were easy for me. I made myself smaller so others would feel bigger. But that made you angry," X observed. Marcus nodded, surprised by the boy's insight. "How do you know that?" "Because hiding who you really are always makes people angry," X said simply. "It's like wearing shoes that are too small. It hurts, and eventually you want to take them off and let your feet breathe. So I stopped hiding." Marcus continued. "In high school, I decided if people thought I was showing off, I might as well really show off. I started using my intelligence like a weapon. I made sure everyone knew I was smarter than them. And that made you lonely," X said quietly. The words hit Marcus like a punch to the stomach. "Yes," he whispered. "So lonely." He had never admitted that to anyone. Not to his colleagues, not to his few friends, not even to himself most of the time. But this child had seen through him completely. "And now you test other children the way Mrs. Patterson tested you," X continued. "You try to humble them before they can feel too proud." Marcus felt his breath catch. I thought I was helping them, preparing them for the real world, teaching them that intelligence requires discipline. But really you were teaching them the same lesson she taught you," X said gently. "That being smart means being alone." The truth of it was devastating. Marcus had spent 30 years passing on Mrs. Patterson's cruelty, one student at a time. How many 8-year-olds had he taught to be ashamed of their gifts? How many brilliant children had he convinced that intelligence was a burden instead of a blessing? "I became her," Marcus said, the realization crushing him. "I became the very person who hurt me." "But you don't have to stay that way," X said. "That scared little boy is still in there somewhere. The one who loved learning and felt joy when he discovered something new." Marcus pulled out the photograph and stared at it through his tears. That child looked so happy, so excited about life and learning. What would that boy think of who Marcus had become? "I don't know how to be him again," Marcus admitted. "I've been angry and alone for so long." "Maybe start by asking a different kind of question," X suggested. "What do you mean?" X smiled, the first time he had smiled since entering the office. "Instead of asking questions to prove how smart you are, or to make others feel small, what if you asked questions to help people feel understood?" Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I don't know how to do that." "You could start with me," X offered. "What would you really like to know about me? Not to test me or challenge me, but just because you're curious." The invitation hung in the air between them. Marcus realized he had been so focused on proving this boy wasn't as special as people claimed that he had never actually tried to understand who X really was. Marcus struggled to form the question. After 30 years of using words as weapons, how did you use them as bridges instead? Finally, he managed to speak. What's it like, being so young but understanding so much about how people feel? Sometimes. It's wonderful, X answered honestly. Like when I help someone feel less alone. But sometimes it's really hard, because I can see when people are hurting and I want to fix it, but I'm just a kid. Is that why you asked about my happiness? Marcus asked. Because you could see I was hurting? X nodded. You have really sad eyes, Professor. Like you've been carrying something heavy for a very long time. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. This child had seen his pain and, instead of using it against him or running away from it, had tried to help. When was the last time anyone had shown him such kindness? I have one more question for you, Marcus said, his voice stronger now. Okay, X replied. Marcus looked at his folder of impossible questions, then set it aside. Whatever was in there didn't matter anymore. He had a different question now, one that came from curiosity instead of cruelty. If you could give one piece of advice to someone who's forgotten how to be happy, Marcus asked, what would it be? X thought for a moment, his face serious and thoughtful, and then he gave an answer that would change Marcus's life forever. But first, X did something unexpected. He stood up from his chair and walked over to Marcus's bookshelf. His small fingers moved along the rows of thick books until he found what he was looking for, the faded photograph. He pulled it out from behind the books and held it gently, like it was made of glass. You were so happy here, X said softly, looking at the picture of 8-year-old Marcus with his science fair ribbon. Look at that smile. You were proud of yourself, and you should have been. Marcus stared at the photo in the boy's hands. He had hidden it for so many years, ashamed of that innocent joy. Now, seeing it in the light again, he remembered exactly how he had felt that day. Pure excitement, wonder, the thrill of discovery. What happened to him? X asked, his voice full of genuine sadness. Mrs. Patterson happened, Marcus whispered. 3 days after that photo was taken, she told me I was showing off. She said smart children were arrogant and needed to be humbled. And you believed her, X said, not as a question, but as a gentle observation. Everyone did. My parents thought she was helping me become more humble. My classmates were happy to see me knock down a peg. Even I started to believe that my excitement about learning was something ugly. X set the photo on Marcus's desk where they could both see it. But she was wrong. Was she? Marcus asked, his voice breaking. Maybe I was showing off. Maybe I did need to learn humility. Look at this picture, X said firmly. Really look at it. Do you see a show-off? Do you see someone who thinks they're better than others? Marcus studied the photograph through his tears. The boy in the picture wasn't smug or arrogant. He was just joyful, excited about science and learning and discovery. His smile was genuine, not superior. I see someone who loved learning, Marcus admitted. Exactly, X said. That little boy wasn't showing off. He was sharing his joy. There's a big difference. The words hit Marcus like lightning. Sharing his joy. That's what he had been doing at 8 years old. Not bragging or trying to make others feel small. Just wanting to share the amazing feeling of understanding something new. But people got angry, Marcus said. They didn't want to hear about my excitement. That's because they were scared, X explained. When someone else is really good at something, it can make us worry that we're not good enough. But that's not your fault. You can't make yourself smaller just to help others feel bigger. Marcus felt something breaking open inside his chest. 30 years of guilt and shame began to crack and crumble. You mean it was okay to be excited? It was okay to love learning. It was more than okay, X said with conviction. It was beautiful. The world needs people who get excited about discovery. How else do we learn new things? How else do we solve problems? But I became so mean, Marcus said, his voice filled with regret. I used my intelligence to hurt people, just like she hurt me. Because you were in pain, X said gently. Hurt people, but understanding people heal people. The boy walked around the desk and stood next to Marcus's chair. Up close, Marcus could see the wisdom in those young eyes, but also something else. Kindness, compassion, the very things that had been missing from his own life for so long. You asked me what advice I would give to someone who's forgotten how to be happy, X said. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. I would tell them to find that little kid inside who used to love things. Really love things. Not because they had to, or because it made them look smart, but because it felt amazing to discover something new. X picked up the photograph again. This boy loved science so much that it made him glow. That feeling is still in there, Professor. It's just been hiding under all the hurt. But how do I find him again? Marcus asked. How do I get back to that joy? Start by forgiving him, X said simply. Forgiving who? That 8-year-old boy. You've been angry at him for 30 years. Angry at him for being excited, for showing his intelligence, for not knowing how to hide his gifts. But he didn't do anything wrong. The truth of it washed over Marcus like a wave. He had been carrying anger at his younger self all this time, blaming that innocent child for not being wiser, for not protecting himself better, for trusting adults, who should have nurtured his gifts instead of crushing them. He was just a little boy who loved learning, Marcus said, the realization breaking his heart open. He was perfect exactly as he was, X confirmed. Excited, curious, full of wonder. That's what intelligence should look like. That's what I try to look like when I solve problems. Not better than anyone else, just happy to understand something new. Marcus looked at this remarkable child who could solve impossible math problems, but cared more about healing wounded hearts, who could see past 30 years of armor to the frightened boy underneath, who had somehow known exactly what Marcus needed to hear. How are you so wise? Marcus asked in wonder. Because I felt the same pain, X admitted. Being really smart can be lonely. People expect things from you, or they get scared of you, or they try to make you feel bad about your gifts. I used to think my intelligence was a curse too. What changed your mind? X smiled, that same bright, joyful smile that 8-year-old Marcus had worn in the photograph. I realized that my gifts weren't meant to make me special or separate. They were meant to help me understand others better, to see when people are hurting and maybe help them feel less alone. Marcus felt his whole world shifting. Intelligence as connection instead of separation. Gifts used for healing instead of harming. Joy instead of loneliness. That little boy in the picture, X said, pointing to the photograph. He's still there. Still hoping. Still dreaming. Still capable of wonder. You don't have to keep him locked away. For the first time in 30 years, Marcus smiled through his tears. Not the cold, superior smile he showed his students, but the same warm, genuine smile from the photograph. Thank you, he whispered to this extraordinary child who had given him back his joy. Elon, who had been watching this incredible exchange in amazed silence, cleared his throat gently. Show him, X, he said quietly. Show him what you've been working on. Marcus wiped his eyes and looked up with curiosity instead of suspicion for the first time in years. What is it? X reached into his backpack and pulled out something that made Marcus blink in surprise. It wasn't a computer or tablet or any fancy device. It was just a simple notebook, the kind with a blue cover that kids used in school. The edges were worn from use, and it was held together with a rubber band. This is my real project, X said, setting the notebook on Marcus's desk. It's not very fancy, but it's helped a lot of people. What's in it? Marcus asked, his voice full of genuine interest. I call it the emotion map, X explained, carefully removing the rubber band. It's a way of understanding why people act the way they do when they're hurting. He opened the notebook to the first page. Marcus leaned forward and saw something amazing. The page was filled with simple drawings of faces showing different emotions, but underneath each face were detailed notes written in a child's careful handwriting. When someone is mean to you, X read from the page, there are usually 7 possible reasons. They're scared, they're hurt, they're confused, they feel powerless, they're protecting something, they're copying someone else, or they're testing if you'll still care about them. Marcus studied the drawings. They were sophisticated concepts explained in the simplest possible terms. Each emotion was broken down into easy-to-understand parts, like a map showing different routes through the same difficult territory. Mrs. Patterson wasn't mean because she hated smart kids, X continued, turning to another page. She was probably scared that she wasn't smart enough herself. Or maybe someone had made her feel bad about her intelligence when she was young. So she was copying what happened to her. The insight hit Marcus like a revelation. He had spent 30 years hating Mrs. Patterson, imagining her as some kind of monster who enjoyed crushing children's spirits. But what if she had been a wounded child too, just passing on the pain someone had given her? Hurt people, X said softly. But understanding people heal people. X flipped to another section of the notebook. This page showed what he called connection bridges, simple ways to help others feel seen and valued. Ask about their day and really listen. To the answer, Marcus read from the list. Notice when they're sad, even if they try to hide it. Celebrate their small victories, not just their big ones. Share your own struggles so they don't feel alone. The notebook was filled with page after page of wisdom like this. Drawings of children and adults, charts showing how emotions connected to behaviors, and simple strategies for helping people feel understood. How did you learn all this? Marcus asked in wonder. By watching, X said, and by feeling it myself. When you're different, you spend a lot of time trying to figure out why people react the way they do. Have you tested these ideas? X's eyes lit up. That's the best part. I volunteer at the community center downtown. There are kids there from all kinds of families. Some are really angry. Some are really sad. Some are so shy they won't talk to anyone. And your emotion map helps them. It helps me understand them. X corrected. Once I understand why someone is acting mean or scared, I can figure out what they really need. Usually, they just need to feel like someone cares about them. X turned to a page filled with photographs and drawings. Marcus saw pictures of children smiling, playing together, hugging. But written next to each photo was a story. This is Tyler, X said, pointing to a picture of a boy with angry eyes. He used to pick fights with everyone. But when I realized he was angry because his dad left and he felt powerless, I started asking him to help me with projects, giving him jobs where he could feel strong and useful. And it worked. Look, X flipped the page to show another photo of the same boy, but now he was smiling and had his arm around a smaller child. Now he helps protect the younger kids instead of bullying them. He still feels strong, but in a good way. Marcus stared at the transformation captured in those two photographs. That's incredible. This is Sarah, X continued, showing a picture of a girl who looked scared and alone. She wouldn't talk to anyone for weeks. But I figured out she was scared because her mom was always yelling at her for not being smart enough. What did you do? I started celebrating every little thing she did right. When she colored inside the lines, I told her how careful and patient she was. When she helped clean up toys, I thanked her for being thoughtful. Pretty soon, she started believing she was good at things. The next photo showed the same girl, but now she was raising her hand eagerly, just like Marcus had done in Mrs. Patterson's classroom all those years ago. You gave her back her confidence, Marcus said, understanding completely. Everyone deserves to feel proud of their gifts, X said simply, even if their gifts are different from what other people expect. Marcus flipped through more pages, seeing story after story of children who had been helped by this remarkable boy's understanding. Bullies who became protectors, shy kids who found their voices, angry children who learned to trust again. This isn't just a school project, Marcus realized. This is revolutionary. You could publish this research. Universities would want to study your methods. X shook his head. I don't want to publish it. Why not? You could be famous. You could make money. You could change how people think about psychology. Because then it would belong to universities and researchers, X explained. I want it to belong to everyone. Every parent should know how to understand their child's emotions. Every teacher should know how to help students feel valued. Every kid should know that being different doesn't mean being wrong. Marcus stared at this 12-year-old boy who could become rich and famous, but only wanted to help people feel less alone, who had solved the mystery of human connection and wanted to give it away for free. You really don't care about being special, do you? Marcus asked. I already am special, X said with a smile. So are you. So is everyone. The trick isn't trying to prove you're special. The trick is helping others remember that they're special too. Marcus looked at the emotion map one more time, then at the photograph of his 8-year-old self, then at this wise child who had somehow healed 30 years of pain in a single afternoon, for the first time since Mrs. Patterson's classroom. Marcus felt genuinely excited about learning something new. The feeling was strange and wonderful. His heart was beating faster, not from nervousness, but from curiosity. His mind was racing with questions. Real questions, not the cruel tests he usually created to humble students. He wanted to understand everything about X's emotion map, about how this child had figured out what took most adults a lifetime to learn. X, Marcus said, his voice filled with wonder. How did you know that understanding emotions was more important than solving math problems? The boy thought for a moment, closing his notebook carefully. Because math problems have answers that work every time. 2 plus 2 always equals 4. But people are different every day. What makes someone happy on Monday might make them sad on Tuesday. Marcus nodded, beginning to understand. So you needed different tools. Exactly. And the tools had to be simple enough that anyone could use them, even when they were upset or scared. Elon leaned forward, pride shining in his eyes. Tell him about the first time you used it, X. X looked a little embarrassed. Dad, that's kind of personal. It's okay, Marcus said gently. You don't have to share anything that makes you uncomfortable. The kindness in his own voice surprised Marcus. When had he learned to speak to children with such gentleness? Maybe healing his relationship with his own inner child was already changing how he treated others. Actually, X said after a moment, I think you might understand this story, Professor. He sat back in his chair, his young face serious but peaceful. The first person I used the emotion map on was myself, X began. I was 10 years old, and we had gone to a family gathering. All my cousins were there, and they kept asking me to solve hard math problems like I was some kind of performing trick. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He knew exactly what that felt like. At first, I was happy to show them what I could do, X continued. But then they started getting weird about it. Some of them got quiet and wouldn't talk to me anymore. Others started saying things like show off and thinks he's better than us. Just like Mrs. Patterson, Marcus whispered. I went to my room and cried, X admitted. I felt so confused. I wasn't trying to make anyone feel bad. I was just excited about numbers and wanted to share that excitement. Marcus felt tears stinging his eyes again. This was exactly what had happened to him, except X had been even younger. What did you do? I started mapping my own emotions, X said. I drew pictures of how I felt and tried to figure out why everyone had gotten so upset. That's when I realized that when people feel small, they sometimes try to make others feel small too. And your cousins felt small because you were good at math? Not because I was good at it, X corrected. Because they thought being good at math made me better than them as a person. They didn't understand that being smart at one thing doesn't make you better than someone who's smart at different things. Marcus leaned back in his chair, amazed by this child's wisdom. So you learned to see their behavior as fear instead of meanness. Exactly. And once I understood they were scared, I could figure out how to help them feel better about themselves instead of trying to prove I wasn't actually smart. What did you do? X smiled. I started asking them about things they were good at. My cousin Jake is amazing at drawing. Lisa can sing like an angel. Tommy knows everything about dinosaurs. Once we started talking about their gifts, they forgot to be scared of mine. Marcus shook his head in wonder. At 10 years old, this boy had figured out how to turn competition into celebration, jealousy into joy. It had taken Marcus 30 years to even begin to understand what X had learned as a child. That's when I knew I wanted to help other people feel better about themselves too, X said. Because feeling bad about yourself hurts so much, and it makes you want to hurt others. Marcus sat quietly for a long moment, processing everything he had heard. This remarkable child had taken the same painful experience that had broken Marcus and used it to build bridges instead of walls. X, Marcus said finally, his voice steady and sure. I have one final question for you. But this one isn't a test. This isn't to prove how smart you are, or to humble you, or to make you fail. The boy nodded, his dark eyes attentive and kind. This is a real question, from someone who genuinely wants to learn from you. X waited patiently. Marcus took a deep breath. After 30 years of asking questions designed to hurt, he was about to ask one designed to heal. If you could give one piece of advice to every adult in the world, including me, what would it be? This was it. The moment that would complete X's transformation of Marcus's heart. The question that would produce the answer Marcus needed to hear more than anything else in the world. The X looked at Marcus with those wise, compassionate eyes. He thought for a long moment, not because he didn't know the answer, but because he wanted to give the best answer possible. The room was completely silent. Even the sounds from the hallway seemed to fade away. Marcus felt like his entire life had been leading up to this moment, this question, this answer from this extraordinary child. Professor Marcus. X began, using his first name with gentle respect. I would tell every adult to remember that you were once a child who just wanted to be loved for who you were. Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. Every mean thing you do, every wall you build, every time you use your gifts to hurt instead of heal, it all comes from that scared little kid inside who was told they weren't enough just as they were. The boy's voice was gentle but absolutely certain. But here's the secret adults forget. That child is still there, still hoping, still dreaming, still capable of wonder and joy and connection. You don't have to keep protecting that child by pushing others away. You can protect them by being brave enough to let people love you exactly as you are. Marcus stared at this 12-year-old who had just delivered the most profound wisdom he had ever heard. And remember, X continued, every other adult is also just a grown-up child who wanted to be loved. When they're difficult, they're not your enemy. They're just scared kids in adult bodies, trying to figure out how to be okay. The room was filled with the most complete silence Marcus had ever experienced. He had asked thousands of questions in his career. He had heard millions of answers. But never, in 30 years of teaching, had anyone given him an answer that changed everything. Marcus sat in complete silence for a full minute. Tears flowed freely down his face. Not tears of sadness this time, but tears of recognition and relief. It was like someone had turned on a light in a room where he had been stumbling around in the dark for 30 years. 40 years, he whispered, his voice shaking. 40 years I've been trying to prove that 8-year-old boy was worthy of love by making others feel small. And you just showed me I had it backwards. He picked up the photograph of his younger self again, but now he saw it with completely different eyes. That little boy wasn't someone to be ashamed of or angry at. He was someone to be protected and cherished. I was already worthy, Marcus said, the truth washing over him like warm sunlight. I was always worthy. I just forgot. Everyone is, X said simply. That's what adults forget. You don't have to earn love by being perfect or smart or impressive. You deserve love just because you exist. Marcus turned to Elon, who had been watching this incredible transformation with amazement. Your son, he's not just intellectually gifted. He has wisdom that most adults never develop. How did you know to bring him here? Elon's eyes were wet with emotion. Honestly, I thought you'd evaluate his academic potential and maybe recommend some advanced programs. I had no idea this would happen. X has a way of seeing right to the heart of things, but I never expected. Neither did I, Marcus admitted, looking at X with wonder. You've changed my life today. How can I ever repay you? By being kind to your students, X said without hesitation. By remembering that everyone who walks into your classroom is someone's precious child, including you. By using your intelligence to build bridges instead of walls. Marcus felt understanding flood through him like a river breaking through a dam. I've been teaching wrong all these years. I thought my job was to break students down so they'd get stronger. But really, my job is to help them discover they were strong all along. Now you're getting it. X grinned, the first time he had smiled broadly during the entire visit. The joy on his young face was infectious. Marcus stood up and did something he hadn't done in decades. He walked around his massive desk and knelt down so he was at eye level with this remarkable boy. Then he did something even more surprising. He opened his arms. X didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and hugged the professor who had started this meeting as a cold, intimidating examiner and was ending it as a healing human being. Thank you, Marcus whispered into the hug. Thank you for seeing the child in me. Thank you for reminding me who I really am underneath all the armor. Thank you for letting me see him, X whispered back. He's beautiful. He always was. When they separated, Marcus felt lighter than he had in 30 years. The weight he had been carrying, the anger, the loneliness, the need to prove himself over and over again, had simply melted away. What happens now? Marcus asked. How do I become the teacher that little boy would have wanted? Start tomorrow, X suggested. When your first student walks in, try to see the child in them who just wants to learn and be valued. Ask yourself, what would make this person feel seen and appreciated? Instead of what would humble them, Marcus said, understanding completely. Exactly. And when you feel yourself getting frustrated or wanting to be mean, remember that they're probably just scared. Scared of looking stupid, Scared of disappointing people, scared of not being good enough. Marcus nodded. Because that's how I felt when Mrs. Patterson made me ashamed of being smart. And that's how every student feels when they're struggling, X said. The mean ones, the lazy ones, the ones who don't seem to care, they're all just scared children trying to protect themselves. Marcus felt his heart expanding with compassion he had forgotten he possessed. How many students had he hurt over the years because he couldn't see past his own pain? How many brilliant children had he taught to hide their gifts the way he had learned to hide his? I want to start over, Marcus said. I want to learn how to teach the way you help people, with understanding instead of judgment. You don't have to start over, X said gently. You just have to remember who you were before the hurt. That excited little boy who loved learning? He can teach others to love learning too. Marcus looked at his office with new eyes. All those certificates and awards on the walls, they suddenly seemed less important than the possibility of having even one thank you card from a student who felt truly seen and valued. Will you help me? Marcus asked. Will you teach me how to use your emotion map? We can learn together, X said. You can teach me about advanced academics, and I can share what I've learned about feelings. We can help each other become better. The idea filled Marcus with excitement. Not the desperate need to prove himself that had driven him for so long, but genuine enthusiasm about growing and learning and helping others. I'd like that very much, Marcus said. Elon stood up, clearly moved by what he had witnessed. I think this is the beginning of something important for both of you. As they prepared to leave, Marcus realized something wonderful. He wasn't saying goodbye to a student he had tested and judged. He was saying goodbye to a friend who had given him the greatest gift possible, the return of his own joy. X, Marcus called as they reached the door. That 8-year-old boy with the science fair ribbon? He says thank you. X turned back. With that brilliant smile. Tell him he's perfect exactly as he is. He always was. For the first time in 30 years, Marcus believed it was true. 6 months later, Harvard University was buzzing with the most incredible rumors anyone could. Remember, students whispered in hallways, gathered in study groups, and filled online forums with stories that seemed too amazing to be real. Did you hear about Professor Henley's class yesterday? Sarah Chin asked her roommate, her eyes wide with disbelief. No. What happened? Maya replied, looking up from her textbook. He actually smiled. Like a real smile, not that scary fake one he used to do. And when Tommy Martinez got confused about calculus, instead of making him feel stupid, Professor Henley sat down next to him and said, "Let's figure this out together." Maya dropped her pencil. Are we talking about the same Professor Henley? The one they call the wall? That's just it, Sarah said, sitting on her bed with excitement. Nobody calls him that anymore. Students are actually fighting to get into his classes now. The transformation of Marcus Henley had become the most talked about mystery at Harvard. Students who had feared him for years were discovering a completely different person behind that intimidating desk. He asked how I was doing after my grandmother died. Freshman Lisa Park told her study group. Like, he actually remembered that. I had mentioned it 3 weeks ago, and he didn't just ask to be polite. He really listened when I told him how hard it was. Yesterday, he celebrated when our whole class finally understood a difficult concept, added Senior James Wright. He looked genuinely happy that we got it. Not satisfied that he had taught us something hard, but happy that we felt proud of ourselves. The changes weren't just in how Marcus treated his students. His entire approach to teaching had transformed. Where once he had created impossible tests designed to humble brilliant minds, now he crafted challenges that helped students discover their own capabilities. His office had changed too. The intimidating certificates were still there, but now they shared wall space with thank you cards from grateful students. Photos of him with academic dignitaries were joined by pictures of study groups and classroom celebrations. And right in the center of his desk, where everyone could see it, sat the photograph of 8-year-old Marcus with his science fair ribbon. Instead of hiding his joy, he was finally proud of it. The most remarkable change was Marcus himself. Colleagues who had known him for decades watched in amazement as the cold, distant professor became warm and encouraging. Faculty meetings that used to be tense affairs became collaborative discussions. I don't understand it, Dr. Patricia Williams confided to Dr. Robert Chin over coffee. It's like he became a completely different person overnight. What could possibly cause such a dramatic change? Maybe he just remembered something important, Dr. Chin suggested. Sometimes we forget who we really are underneath all our professional armor. But Marcus knew exactly what had caused the change. Every morning when he looked at that photograph on his desk, he remembered X's words. You were once a child who just wanted to be loved for who you were. And every day, that reminder helped him see his students not as minds to be tested or egos to be crushed, but as precious children trying their best to learn and grow. The ripple effects extended far beyond Harvard's walls. Marcus had started a new project inspired by X's emotion map. He called it the Wisdom Exchange, a program where gifted children mentored struggling adults in emotional intelligence, while adults helped children with academic subjects. It's revolutionary, he explained to his colleague Dr. Sarah Chun during one of their weekly lunch meetings. We've been thinking about education all wrong. Intelligence isn't just about what you know. It's about how you use what you know to make others feel valued and understood. Dr. Chin watched her transformed colleague with wonder. Marcus, I have to ask, what happened 6 months ago? You've never told anyone what caused this incredible change. Marcus smiled, the same warm, genuine smile from his childhood photograph. I met a teacher, he said simply. The best teacher I've ever encountered. He taught me that the purpose of intelligence isn't to prove you're better than others. It's to help others feel less alone in the world. That sounds like quite a teacher. Where does he work? He's 12 years old, Marcus said, his eyes twinkling with joy. And he works at a community center, helping kids understand their emotions. Meanwhile, across the city, X continued his own work with renewed energy. His emotion map had helped dozens of families reconnect. Former bullies at the community center now volunteered as peer counselors. Children who had been too shy to speak were raising their hands eagerly in school. Even the adults in X's life had been transformed by his wisdom. Elon watched his son with constant amazement, seeing how the boy's gift for understanding emotions was changing everyone around him. You know, Elon told X one evening as they walked home from the community center, I've built rockets and cars and companies that are worth billions of dollars. But what you're building, human connection and understanding, that might be more important than all of it. It's not more important, Dad, X replied thoughtfully. It's the foundation that makes everything else meaningful. What good is reaching Mars if we can't reach each other? What's the point of building amazing technology if people are still lonely and scared? Elon smiled, remembering when X had asked Professor Henley about happiness. His son had a way of cutting through complexity to find the simple truths that mattered most. Back at Harvard, Marcus was preparing for his evening class, Advanced Mathematical Theory. Once, this had been his most feared course, where brilliant graduate students came to be humbled by impossible problems. Now it was his most popular class, where brilliant graduate students came to discover the joy of learning together at AS students. Filed into the classroom, Marcus didn't see future competitors or minds to be tested. He saw Sarah, who was worried about her mother's health. James, who was struggling with self-doubt despite his obvious talent. Maria, who was homesick but too proud to admit it. He saw children who needed to feel valued and understood. Just like he had needed 30 years ago. Just like everyone needed every single day. Good evening, Marcus said warmly as the last student took their seat. Before we begin tonight's lesson, I want to ask each of you something important. How are you really doing? Not just academically, but as human beings. The students looked surprised but pleased. This was what they had come to expect from the new Professor Henley, someone who cared about their whole selves, not just their brains. As they shared their struggles and successes, Marcus listened with the wisdom X had taught him. When people feel seen and valued, they bloom. When they feel safe to be vulnerable, they become stronger. And when teachers remember that they were once students too, learning becomes joyful again. 1 year after their first meeting, Marcus received an invitation that made him cry happy tears. The envelope was simple and white, but the words inside took his breath away. Professor Marcus Henley is cordially invited to attend the United Nations Youth Peace Ambassador Ceremony, where X Musk will be honored as the youngest peace ambassador in history. Marcus read the invitation 3 times before it sank in. His young friend, the 12-year-old boy who had changed his life with simple wisdom, was being recognized by the entire world for his incredible work. 2 weeks later, Marcus sat in the packed auditorium at the United Nations building in New York City. Delegates from nearly every country filled the seats. Translators whispered in dozens of languages. Cameras flashed as dignitaries took their places. But Marcus only had eyes for the small figure walking toward the podium. X had grown taller in the past year, but his gentle confidence remained unchanged. He looked calm and peaceful as he approached the microphone, like he was simply having a conversation with friends instead of addressing world leaders. Distinguished delegates, honored guests, and friends. X began, his young voice carrying clearly through the vast hall. A year ago, I met a professor who taught me something important. Marcus felt his heart swell with pride and love. Even here, in front of the most important people in the world, X was thinking about others. He showed me that the smartest people are often the loneliest people because they've learned to use their gifts as shields instead of bridges. The audience listened in complete silence. There was something about this boy's voice, not just his words, but the genuine care behind them, that commanded attention. But here's what I've learned since then, X continued. Every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Every mean teacher was once an excited student who got discouraged. Every bully was once a victim who learned to hurt before being hurt. Every quiet kid has volumes to say if someone just listens. Marcus wiped tears from his eyes. X was sharing the wisdom that had healed not just one broken professor, but hundreds of children at the community center. The problems we face as a world, war, poverty, hatred, loneliness, they all come from the same source. People who have forgotten that they matter. People who think they have to fight for love instead of believing they deserve it just for being alive. A murmur of recognition rippled through the audience. These were the most powerful people on earth, yet they were nodding like children hearing a simple truth they had forgotten. So my challenge to all of you, adults and children alike, is this. What if we stopped trying to prove we're better than each other and started trying to understand each other instead? X paused, looking directly at Marcus in the audience. Even from far away, the professor could see the boy's warm smile. Professor Marcus taught me that real intelligence isn't about having the right answers. It's about asking the right questions. And the most important question isn't, how can I show how smart I am? It's how can I help others feel less alone? The crowd erupted in applause, but Marcus barely heard it. He was overwhelmed by the realization that this remarkable child, this wise, loving, extraordinary boy, had just credited him with teaching something profound. But Marcus knew the truth. X had been the teacher all along. As the ceremony continued, speaker after speaker praised X's emotion map project. The Secretary General spoke about how the boy's simple drawings and insights were being adapted by schools in 47 countries. Child psychologists explained how X's approach to understanding emotions was revolutionizing therapy for young people. A video played showing children around the world using X's techniques. Former bullies hugging the kids they used to torment. Shy children raising their hands confidently in class. Angry teenagers learning to talk about their feelings instead of acting out. In just 1 year, the narrator explained, X Musk's emotion map has helped over 10,000 children learn to understand themselves and others better. But more importantly, it has reminded adults everywhere that wisdom often comes in small packages. When the video ended, X returned to the podium for his final remarks. Before I finish, he said, I want to tell you about the most important lesson I've learned this year. It came from a professor who taught me that it's never too late to change. That 40 years of pain can be healed in a single moment of understanding. That scared little children live inside, even the toughest adults. X looked directly at Marcus again. Professor Henley taught me that transformation is possible for everyone. That a person can spend 30 years being one way and then choose to be completely different. Not because they were bad before, but because they remembered who they really were underneath all the hurt. Marcus felt like his heart might burst with gratitude and love. The truth is, X said, his voice growing stronger, we're all just children who grew up but never stopped needing love and understanding. The mean boss, the difficult neighbor, the politician you disagree with, they're all just scared kids in grown-up bodies, trying to figure out how to be okay. The entire assembly sat in stunned silence. This 13-year-old boy had just given them the key to solving every conflict, healing every wound, bridging every divide. So let's remember, X concluded, that peace doesn't start with treaties, or laws or governments. It starts with one person choosing to see the frightened child in another person and offering them the love they've been looking for their whole lives. As the thunderous applause began, Marcus stood up. Then the person next to him stood up. Then another, and another, until the entire United Nations Assembly was on their feet, giving this remarkable boy a standing ovation that lasted for 5 full minutes. But through all the noise and celebration, Marcus could only think one thing. This child hadn't just changed his life. He had given the world a blueprint for healing itself. Later, at the reception, Marcus finally got to speak with X privately. "I'm so proud of you," Marcus said, kneeling down to hug his young friend. "You've accomplished something incredible." "We did it together," X replied. "You showed me that adults can change. That gave me hope that everyone can change." "You were the teacher," Marcus said. "You taught me how to see the child in every adult. And you taught me that the child in every adult is worth saving." X responded to AS. They stood together in that crowded room full of world leaders and dignitaries. Marcus realized something beautiful. This boy who had been tested and questioned and challenged had given the most important answer of all. The answer wasn't about mathematics or science or academic achievement. The answer was about love. Simple, unconditional, healing love, and that answer was already changing the world. 5 years had passed since that life-changing day in Marcus's office. The story of their meeting had become legend at Harvard, whispered by new students and shared by graduating seniors. But the real magic had happened in the quiet moments that followed, in classrooms and community centers around the globe. Marcus, now 57, walked through Harvard Yard with a spring in his step that hadn't been there for 30 years. Students waved and called out greetings as he passed. "Good morning, Professor Henley. See you in class. Thanks for the extra help yesterday." He had written a best-selling book called The Child Within the Student, which had become required reading in education programs worldwide. Universities, from Tokyo to London, invited him to speak about his revolutionary approach to teaching. But Marcus always made sure to credit the real teacher, a 12-year-old boy who had seen past his armor to the wounded child underneath. The secret, he would tell packed auditoriums of educators, isn't making students prove they're smart enough for us. It's proving to students that they're valuable just as they are. His classes at Harvard had waiting lists a mile long. Students didn't just want to learn advanced mathematics from Professor Henley. They wanted to experience what it felt like to be truly seen and valued by a teacher. Many said his classroom had healed wounds they'd carried since childhood. The walls of Marcus's office told the story of his transformation. His academic awards were still there, but they shared space with hundreds of thank you cards from grateful students. Photos showed him laughing with study groups, celebrating student achievements, and mentoring young teachers who wanted to learn his methods. The photograph of 8-year-old Marcus with his science fair ribbon sat in the center of his desk, no longer hidden in shame, but displayed with pride. Next to it was a newer photo, Marcus and X at the United Nations ceremony, both of them beaming with joy. Across the city, X was creating his own revolution. Now 17, he had turned down acceptance letters from every Ivy League school in the country. "Why go to college?" he told the reporters who still followed his story. "When I can create something better?" The Connection Academy occupied a beautiful old building that used to be a traditional school, but everything about it was different. Students of all ages learned together. Emotional intelligence was taught alongside mathematics. Creativity was valued as much as test scores. The school's motto, personally suggested by Marcus, was carved in wood above the entrance. "Intelligence is a gift. Wisdom is a choice. Connection is the purpose." Classes at the Connection Academy looked nothing like traditional education. In one room, a 7-year-old was teaching origami to teenagers, showing them how patience and precision work together. In another, high school students were learning calculus by helping younger children understand basic math concepts. But the most remarkable thing about the school wasn't its innovative methods, it was the atmosphere. Students laughed as they learned. Teachers hugged children who were struggling. Conflicts were resolved through understanding rather than punishment. "We don't just teach subjects here," X explained to the documentary crew filming the school's 5th anniversary. "We teach humans how to be more human." Elon, now 54, watched his son with endless amazement. His companies had achieved incredible technological breakthroughs, colonies on Mars, sustainable energy for entire nations, artificial intelligence that solved complex global problems. But he often told people that X's work was the most important project in the Musk family. Technology can take us to other planets, Elon said in interviews, but emotional intelligence helps us not destroy the one we have. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Marcus made his weekly visit to the Connection Academy. It had become a tradition. Every Friday, he would spend the afternoon helping students with advanced mathematics while learning from X about the latest developments in emotional education. Today felt special, though Marcus couldn't put his finger on why. As he walked through the hallways, he saw the same beautiful chaos that always filled the school. Children of different ages working together, teachers laughing with students, conflicts being resolved through conversation rather than punishment. He found X in his office, a warm, welcoming space filled with student artwork, thank you letters, and photos of children who had been helped by the Emotion Map project. The notebook that had started it all sat in a place of honor on the bookshelf. Marcus, X stood up to greet his old friend. Even at 17, he still had the same kind eyes and gentle smile that had changed everything 5 years ago. "How are you, my young teacher?" Marcus asked, using the affectionate title he had given X years ago. "Excited," X said, his eyes sparkling with the same light Marcus remembered from their first meeting. "I want to show you something." He led Marcus to the window that overlooked the school's playground. Outside, children were playing together. But it wasn't just playing. A group of former bullies were teaching conflict resolution to younger students. Shy children who had once hidden in corners were leading group activities. Students who had struggled academically were tutoring. Others in subjects they had finally mastered. "Do you see it?" X asked. Marcus watched the scene below, his heart swelling with emotion. They're all teaching each other. Exactly. Everyone has something to offer. Everyone has wisdom to share. The bully knows what it feels like to feel powerless. The shy kid understands fear. The struggling student knows how it feels to not understand something and can explain it in a way that makes sense. Marcus nodded, understanding completely. They're all both teachers and students. "Just like us," X said with a smile. "Just like that day in your office when you thought you were testing me, but really we were both learning." Marcus looked at this remarkable young man who had grown from a wise child into an even wiser teenager. "You know what I think, X?" "What's that?" "I think that scared 8-year-old boy who walked into your father's office all those years ago. He was exactly who the world needed him to be. Even then. Especially then." X grinned. "Same with the scared 8-year-old boy who won that science fair. He was perfect too. He just forgot for a while." As the sun set over the Connection Academy, two friends, one who had learned to see the child in every adult, and one who had learned to see the adult potential in every child, continued their conversation about the most important subject of all, how to help people feel less alone in the world. Around the globe, teachers inspired by Marcus's story asked different questions and created safer classrooms. Children who had learned X's techniques helped their families communicate better. Former bullies became protectors. Shy kids found their voices. Adults remembered what it felt like to be excited about learning. The boy who had changed everything wasn't just X. It was also Marcus, the scared 8-year-old who had finally found his way home to joy. And it was every child who had ever been helped by their story to believe that intelligence was a gift to be shared, not a weapon to be wielded. In classrooms and homes and community centers everywhere, the ripple effects continued. One conversation at a time, one healed heart at a time, one child at a time. The test that had begun in Marcus's office had never really ended. It had just transformed into something beautiful, a lifelong lesson in how to see the precious child in every person, and how to help that child remember they were always worthy of love. This story shows us that kindness can change everything. Sometimes the smallest act of understanding can heal years of pain. Sometimes a child's wisdom can transform an adult's heart. That we'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and tell us your city or country. It's amazing how stories like this bring people together from all around the world. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. When we spread stories of kindness and understanding, we help create more kindness in the world. Every like and share helps this message reach someone who might need to hear it today. And don't forget to click on the video appearing on your screen. right now for another inspiring story that will remind you of the power we all have to change lives through simple acts of love and understanding. Thank you for listening. And remember, you were once a child who just wanted to be loved for who you were. That child is still there, and the world needs their kindness.